Here we are, Havana, Cuba. Yay!
In June of 2018, we found ourselves standing at the port in Miami, about to do something that, just a few years earlier, would have sounded almost impossible. We were boarding a cruise ship to Cuba, aboard a Royal Caribbean international ship, part of a brief window in history when cruise travel from the United States to Cuba became possible again after decades of separation. What made the journey even more surreal was knowing that history behind it. Cruise ships from the US had only been allowed to resume travel to Cuba in 2016. And before that, the last cruise ship to enter Havana Harbor from the United States had done so in 1959. Nearly 60 years had passed. Entire generations had lived and died in that span of time. To think that we were able to sail into a place that had remained largely isolated from American tourism for decades felt both exciting and deeply significant. At first, the idea honestly felt daunting. Cuba had always carried this mysterious aura around it. Politically charged, culturally rich, historically frozen in time, and often spoken about with curiosity more than familiarity. We had seen the documentaries, the photographs of vintage cars, the faded pastel buildings, the stories of revolution and resilience. But no amount of videos or articles could prepare us for the feeling of actually going there. And yet, life is often about taking chances. So, we boarded the ship. As the cruise departed Miami and made its way south, the anticipation on board was unlike anything we had experienced before. People weren't just excited for another tropical stop. There was a different energy in the air, almost a collective awareness that we were participating in something historic, however small our role might have been. Conversations throughout the ship revolved around Cuba. Everyone wondered what it would feel like. What would we see? How different would life be? Would it feel welcoming? Would it feel tense? The closer we got, the more real it became. Then came the morning we arrived in Havana. I still remember waking up early and stepping outside as the ship slowly entered the harbor. The air felt heavy and warm, the skyline appeared faded yet beautiful, weathered by time, but standing proudly against the morning light. And in that moment we knew instantly that we were entering a completely different world. Not just another country, a different reality. It was our very first time visiting a communist country, and there was an overwhelming sense of awe, mixed with curiosity and reflection. From nearby Key West to Havana, the geographical distance is incredibly short, but emotionally and visually, it felt as though we had traveled decades into the past. Everything about Havana felt frozen in time. The old American cars from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s weren't tourist props, they were daily life. Bright colored Chevrolets, Fords, and Buicks rolled down the streets, carrying both visitors and locals alike. We did what many tourists do and climbed into one of those classic convertibles for a city tour cruising through Havana. Beneath the blazing Caribbean sun, it was hot, humid, and crowded. But strangely, despite the movement of people and traffic, The city carried an almost haunting stillness. There was noise, but not chaos. Life moved slower. Buildings stood worn and faded, many with peeling paint and crumbling facades. Yet somehow they still radiated beauty and soul. Music drifted from open windows and street corners. Children played outside. Elderly residents sat quietly watching the world pass by from balconies and doorways. Everywhere we looked, there was contrast, poverty and pride, decay and resilience, joy and hardship. It was impossible not to notice. What struck us most was how surreal the experience became every single time we returned to the ship. We would spend hours immersed in the streets, absorbing the realities of every day, Cuban life, and then suddenly step back onto the gleaming, modern world of the cruise ship. That transition was jarring. Inside the ship, where grand staircases, luxury boutiques, endless buffets, elegant dining rooms, bright lights, polished floors, and every imaginable convenience. While minutes earlier, we had walked through neighborhoods where people navigated scarcity, aging, infrastructure, and economic hardship. Sitting in a beautifully designed restaurant on board while reflecting on what we had just witnessed outside created a strange emotional dissonance that's difficult to fully describe. It almost felt like existing between two different centuries. One world overflowing with excess and convenience, the other learning to survive with limitations. And yet, what made Cuba unforgettable was not simply the contrast, it was the humanity. Our tour guides shared stories that stayed with us long after we returned home. They spoke honestly about daily life, about opportunities, restrictions, dreams, frustrations, and hope. Some stories carried subtle political undertones, others focused on family, education, culture, and survival. There was caution in certain conversations, but also sincerity. You could sense both pride for their country and quiet acknowledgement of its struggles. That complexity lingered with me because Cuba was never just one thing. It wasn't simply beautiful. It wasn't simply poor. It wasn't simply political. It was layered, deeply layered, and perhaps that's what made it so emotionally overwhelming. There were moments of genuine joy throughout the trip as well. The music was alive everywhere. The culture felt vibrant and deeply rooted in identity. The people we encountered were warm, expressive, and resilient. Despite limited resources, there was creativity and life in every corner of the city. It reminded me that beauty does not disappear simply because hardship exists. Sometimes beauty becomes even more visible because of hardship. And I found myself wondering something deeply personal. How do people still create joy, peace, meaning, and beauty amid restriction? How does hope survive? Yet somehow in Cuba, it clearly does. People still laugh, still sing, still dance, still love their families, still dream. That realization humbled me. Travel has a way of doing that. It pulls you out of your comfort zone and forces you to confront realities different from your own. It challenges assumptions, it deepens gratitude. It reminds you that the world is far more complicated than headlines or political narratives. This is why travel matters, not simply for photos or vacations or checking destinations off a list, but because it expands our humanity. It allows us to witness lives different from our own and recognize both the privileges we carry and the shared emotions that connect all people. Our journey to Cuba in 2018 was far more than a cruise stop. It became a lesson in perspective, a lesson in history, a lesson in resilience. And years later, it remains one of the most surreal, eye-opening, and unforgettable experiences of our lives. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more.